Hello, my name is Michael Gold, and I teach philosophy and ethics at Broward College. I'm also a rabbi full-time, but my particular interest is philosophy, and in particular the area of philosophy known as metaphysics. Although this is an ethics class, I believe we cannot talk about ethics until we talk about metaphysics. Metaphysics is the study of reality, what's really out there. What's the world made of? What are we as human beings made of? And before we could talk about good and evil, right or wrong, making the right decision, we have to know what does the universe consist of and what do we consist of. So what I want to do to begin to talk about metaphysics is go back to the ancient Greeks who discussed this, the question, what is reality? And there was an argument that goes back to the pre-Socratic days, before Socrates and Plato, between two Greek philosophers. One was named Heraclitus. Heraclitus very famously said, you cannot step into the same river twice. Rivers are always changing. Everything is always changing. We live in a world that's constantly in motion, and if we follow Heraclitus all the way to modern ethics, is ethics always changing? Are things ethical today that were considered unethical long ago, or vice versa? Do our ideas about ethics change? That's one of the fascinating ideas. Heraclitus, the world's always changing, but on the other hand, there was another philosopher named Parmenides, and Parmenides believed that nothing really changes. He said, if you think about the world, you can never have something coming from nothing. And change is always something new that wasn't there before, something coming from nothing. So we may think things are changing, but underneath it all, the world is unchanging. Is ethics unchanging? Are there universal, unchangeable ethical laws? So we have this argument. Does the world change? Does the world not change? And it was the great philosopher Plato who came up with a solution that in many ways became the basis of Western philosophy. Plato imagined what it would be like if human beings were in a cave and all they could see were shadows on a wall in front of them, and the shadows were given by a light and figures, silhouettes, figures in front of the light, but all we could see is the shadows. And one person, one prisoner, breaks loose and goes up and sees actually what's casting those shadows. And the way Plato understood this is the shadows are the changing material world, the world we live in. The world we live in changes, but it's a mere shadow. It's not real. The reality is the world that casts those shadows, something that's unchangeable. And that is what Plato called the world of the forms. So we have a changeable world and an unchangeable world. If you are a religious Christian or a religious Jew, you were probably very influenced by Plato. If you believe that our soul comes into this body of ours and our body is always changing, but when we die, the soul returns and goes to this unchangeable, perfect place called heaven, you're quoting pure Plato. That's where that idea comes from. So is the world changing? Is it unchanging? If you think about it, think about mathematics. We could draw a triangle, but it's not a true triangle. We can't draw it infinitely thin and infinitely straight. It's just the reflection of a triangle. A true triangle you can only reach through your mind, through thinking about it, and that's in the world of the forms. Now, the idea that we learn about the world through looking at it, through seeing the changes in the world, Heraclitus' idea is known as empiricism. On the other hand, the idea that we could learn about the world through our mind, like Plato, like Parmenides, is called rationalism. And the great fight in philosophy is, do we learn, do we gain knowledge through our senses, through empiricism? Are we empiricists? Do we learn it through our mind, through thinking about it without even looking out into the world. And we're going to apply those ideas to ethics as we go. Good or bad, right or wrong. Is murder wrong? Is murder right? And why is it wrong? Is torture wrong? Do we learn that by looking out into the world, as empiricists do, by seeing things, by seeing the changing world? Or do we learn that by thinking about it as rationalists do? Are these ethical ideas implanted in our mind from before we were born? And that's going to become a great fight between the empiricists and the rationalists, and each is going to come up with a very different understanding of how do we reach ethics, how do we know what is good and what is bad. We will continue this.